Summer Baldwin was originally from Washington, but as an adult, she decided to move to Texas. She ended up moving there really just because a bunch of her friends were living in the city. Her friends, you know, they welcomed her with open arms. They said she was just one of those people you could always count on. Summer was the kind of person who had this way about her, a warmth that made you feel like you could tell her all your secrets. And she never, ever refused to help someone if she could. So, at some point in her life, Summer started using various types of illegal drugs, and this, led her to fall in with some questionable people, not always the best crowd. Some of the people she knew were involved in sex work, and, well, gradually, Summer got more and more pulled into that world herself, until that eventually became how she made her living. She was seen working pretty often in one particular area near the center of the city. Real quick, before we start, drop your city in the comments. Tell me what time it is there and what the weather's like. Also, let me know which case you'd want to see next and why I should look into it. And hey, while you're at it, go ahead and hit subscribe. Why not? All right, let's not waste time. Let's go. It was in that area on a Sunday evening, September 11th, 2005, that Summer met up with a friend of hers. They stood and talked for a bit by a convenience store, and then they each went their own way. And from that point on, well, no one heard from Summer again. 2 days later, on Tuesday, September 13th, a man who worked at the local garbage dump was watching as a truck was unloading trash into this huge pile of junk. And that's when he noticed it. A large black suitcase. This thing caught his eye because it was just sticking out of the pile. It looked like it was full, like something was inside, and it hadn't been crushed by the weight of all the other garbage. So, this worker walks over to the suitcase, and when he opens it, the first thing he sees is a human leg. When the man opens the suitcase all the way, he realizes there's a dead woman lying in there, curled up in a fetal position. The workers immediately shut down all the machines, all the garbage trucks, to make sure they don't disturb the area anymore. And they call the police. As soon as the police arrive at the scene of this awful discovery, they confirm that it is, in fact, a woman's body, and she's completely naked. The woman, of course, had no identification on her, no cell phone, so the police had no idea who was in front of them. The only thing they could really do at that time was cordon off the area, though they later said this was really just protocol. They knew it was almost impossible that they'd find any useful evidence there, any DNA. I mean, the suitcase was in a landfill, surrounded by tons of garbage. Besides that, it already looked pretty filthy on the outside from everything it had come into contact with. The police send the body to the forensic experts, and the specialists are able to determine that the woman had been dead for at least 1 day, and that her death was possibly caused by a traumatic injury or maybe strangulation. She had nothing with her that could point to who she was. Nothing. No clues for them to follow. The only thing they found on the woman's body was a tattoo on her ankle with the name Summer. But since the experts couldn't get any more information, they decided to run the woman's fingerprints through the National Police database, just to see if they could find anything. And that's when they discovered that this woman's name was in fact Summer. As soon as they were able to identify the body and they knew who they were dealing with, the police contacted her mother to give her the terrible news, and also to ask her for any information, any clue at all that she could give them. It was the mother who gave the police more specific details about the places her daughter would frequent. After detectives questioned several of Summer's friends, the first person they wanted to talk to, their first suspect was one of the woman's ex-boyfriends. Her friends told them that this ex had been very violent throughout his entire relationship with Summer. He had a harsh personality and some mental health problems. The detectives decide to bring him in for questioning because honestly, this guy was their only suspect at the time. He manages, however, to provide a solid alibi. So as soon as his alibi was verified, he was immediately excluded as a possible suspect. Another clue about who might be responsible came from Summer's friend, a woman named Margie. She told him that on Sunday evening, September 11th, she was also out working, right near that same store. She says she was there and saw Summer arrive in a red van with a man who had Latino facial features. He had pretty short hair, but that was about all the friend was able to see at that moment. She said that when Summer saw her, she got out of this person's van to chat with her for a little bit. And she said that this person, he was her client, and that this was the second time she had met with him. The first meeting had been on Saturday evening. After they chatted for a bit, Summer went back to the van with this man, and they drove off. Margie said that she didn't see where they went, and she didn't know the man. So he became the last person Summer was seen with while she was still alive. The detectives were, of course, very interested in finding this man and finding out who he was. But the few details that Summer's friend provided, it just wasn't enough to go on. So for now, the police had to decide to focus on what they did have. So the police decided to focus on the evidence they had, which was Summer's body and the suitcase she was found in. Now, this suitcase on the outside, it looked pretty dirty because it had been in contact with all that garbage. But when detectives examined it more carefully, I mean, really down to the smallest details, they discovered that the inside of the suitcase was actually quite new. It even still had one of those little plastic things used for attaching price tags, as if the tag had just been torn off. And inside the suitcase, there was still a tag with a barcode on it. So using this barcode, the detectives were able to contact the company that sold the suitcase. This seller tells them that this particular brand and model was sold only in Walmart stores. So investigators go to the Walmart there in Lubbock to see if there are any records, any information that could help them. And what they learn is that with this barcode, as soon as it's entered into the store's system, they can see exactly how many suitcases were sold, at what time, and in which specific store. At the request of the detectives, Walmart used the barcode and pulled up information that 2 suitcases of that same model were purchased on September 12th. Now, this was just one day before Summer's body was found, and only a few hours after her friend last saw her by the convenience store. One purchase was made at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the other was made after 3 o'clock in the morning. The investigators requested access to the surveillance cameras, and they saw the people who bought the suitcases. These were 2 different people. The person who made the purchase at 3 in the afternoon was tracked down, and she was able to explain why she bought the suitcase and even provided it for the police to inspect. But the other person, the one who made the purchase in the middle of the night, that one really got their attention. The recordings show a man entering the store. This man was dressed in a green striped shirt and light brown shorts. It was also clear that he had Latino facial features and he had short hair. As soon as he paid for the items, he walks through the parking lot and is seen getting into a van that matched the description given by Summer's friend. And although the recordings from the cameras weren't very clear, it was possible to make out that there was in fact a red pickup truck parked outside the Walmart. On the camera footage, the detectives also noticed that when this person was paying for the suitcase at the cashier, he also bought disposable gloves. So far, everything was pointing to the fact that this person could be of interest in Summer's case. He was Latino with short hair. He came in a red van to buy a suitcase. He bought a suitcase identical to the one in which Summer's body was found. Plus, for an ordinary person, it's a little strange to go to Walmart at 3 o'clock in the morning to buy a suitcase and disposable gloves. I mean, you gotta admit. And finally, the detectives get the information they need to find out who this person was, because when he made the purchase, he didn't pay with cash. He paid with a credit card. So when he paid with the card, his data was left behind in the system. However, when they try to get access to this banking information, they can't free. It turns out the card was issued in Mexico. The authorities had to spend time getting a warrant from a judge. And as soon as they have that warrant, they're able to access the data. As a result, it turns out that the person who interested the police was a man named Rosendo Rodriguez, a Marine reservist from San Antonio, Texas. That same card had been used at a gas station that was nearby. And the same card was used at the Holiday Inn Hotel, located right across the street from that gas station. Further, the detectives find out that in this hotel, the man used the card to withdraw cash from an ATM, and then they learn that he registered under the name Thomas Rodriguez. And despite the fact that he was in the city for weekend training with his unit, he turned out to be the only one of the participants who stayed at this hotel. All his companions stayed at another hotel on the other side of the city. When the police officers enter the room he was renting, they notice it's in disarray. The room hadn't been cleaned, but they also understand that the occupant had already checked out. 2 days had already passed since they found the body, and this room had actually already been rented to someone else. Nevertheless, the detectives decided to inspect it, looking for evidence. They discover small drops of blood on the carpet, and there was a large bloody stain on the mattress, maybe 10 centimeters in size, with numerous splatters. Immediately, forensic specialists took samples of this blood to check for a match. And finally, they realized they need to check the garbage bins that were right outside the room. There, they discover a plastic hotel bag with the hotel's name on it. And inside this bag was a bag from Walmart, which contained several disposable gloves as well as a paper receipt. And when they checked the barcode, it matched the suitcase in which they found Summer. That same day, on the 15th, the authorities decide to arrest Rosendo. At that time, he was no longer in Lubbock. He had returned to San Antonio, Texas. The man lived in the city in his parents' house. That's where he was arrested, and when the police search his house, they find that same green striped shirt he was seen wearing on the Walmart surveillance cameras. They also take his computer to see if they can get any information that was on it. For a whole month, Rosendo does nothing, makes no statements. By the time he decided to confess, the blood that was in the hotel room had already been analyzed, and it was established that it belonged to Summer. The gloves found in the garbage bag were also analyzed, and a mixture of Rosendo's and Summer's DNA was found on them. The man told them what supposedly happened. According to him, he arrived on Friday, September 9th in the city of Lubbock. He arrived specifically for training. He says he didn't know which hotel his comrades would be staying at. He only knew that when they came to these cities, they stayed at hotels of only one brand, but he didn't know which one specifically. So he decided to just choose one of them and register, renting his room for the weekend. And then he realizes that the rest of his comrades stayed at a hotel of the same brand, but on the other side of the city. His commander tells him that there won't be any major problems if the man has already rented a room for the entire weekend. It was precisely because he stayed at a different hotel that Rosendo decides to rent this red van to get from his hotel to his training. On Saturday evening, September 10th, while he was driving, he saw a woman on the street who was crying. And this woman, it was Summer. Because he saw that she was crying, Rosendo stops to see if everything is okay with her, if she needs anything, if he can help her with something. So the man said that after they talked for a bit, they both go to the hotel room that Rosendo had rented, but he says nothing happens between them. He simply brought her to his room so she could calm down and stop crying. After which, the man says he puts her back in the van and drives Summer home. The next day, on Sunday, September 11th, he says he meets her again in the same area as the night before. And when they go to the store, that's when Summer meets her friend there. After this, they go back to the hotel room that Rodriguez was renting. And as he confessed, that night they did have relations. He insisted that these relations were consensual. He said he simply thought he'd found a woman who wanted to be with him. After they were intimate, the woman lights a pipe, and this apparently really upset him. When Rosendo got upset that she lit the pipe, he takes it from her hands and starts to back away from her a little, turning his back to her. According to him, at this moment, she reaches into her bag and takes out a knife that she had brought with her. She starts demanding he give her the pipe back and also tells him to show her where his wallet is because she was going to take all the money he had. He uses this moment of distraction to somehow grab her hand that was holding the knife. Then he manages to turn around, putting his hand on her neck, And at this moment, he begins to strangle her. Rosendo says that the entire time they were struggling, while he held his hand on her neck, she kept trying to move the knife near his arm, and with her other free hand, she was scratching his shoulder. He said they stood like this for about 3 to 5 minutes, until Summer starts to make these wheezing sounds. Then the woman begins to bleed from her nose, and at that point, Rosendo lets her go, and she just falls to the floor. Then he checked to see if she had any signs of life, but once he was convinced that she was no longer breathing, he just assumed that she was already dead. The detective who was listening to Rosendo's story asked him why he didn't do anything to help her, especially since he was trained in first aid. And Rosendo says it was for a few different reasons. That he was panicking, that he didn't really know what was happening. He says that, for example, when he was strangling Summer, she started bleeding from her nose. This blood had gotten into her mouth, on the surface of her mouth. So he didn't want to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He said he didn't want to, contaminate himself. And besides that, since he'd already checked and she had no signs of life, he just thought it was useless. That there was nothing more he could do and it would just be a waste of time. And although Rosendo says he was in a state of panic, that he didn't understand what was happening, he had enough sense to realize what he had done. And that's when Rosendo decided to go to the store, buy a suitcase, buy gloves. It took him about 40 minutes to buy all this, get back to the hotel room, put Summer's body in the suitcase, and then throw it in a garbage container, knowing that it would be picked up early in the morning, Summer's wallet with her ID and driver's license. The man didn't throw it in that same container. He got rid of it a little further away because he didn't want her to be identified quickly so no one would know who this woman was. After everything was done, Rosendo returns to his hotel room, sleeps for a few hours, and then decides he'll just go back to San Antonio. He returns the rented van, gets on a bus, and goes back to his parents' house where he was living. He says he didn't tell a single person about what happened. Not his friends, and not the police. However, he says the first person he wanted to talk to was his father, who was a lawyer with 30 years of experience. But from the 12th until the morning of September 15th, when he was arrested, Rosendo says he just never found the right moment to talk to his dad. Also, Rosendo stated in his defense that he never knew what Summer did for a living, despite the fact that the street where he found her was known for exactly that. The man says that he and Summer never once talked about any kind of payment. He claimed that he acted in self-defense because Summer was the one who attacked him first with a knife. And the fact that he got rid of the body, he explains that by his mental state. That he was in some kind of trance, that he didn't know what he had done because he didn't have clarity of mind. The man also assured them that he never hit Summer and didn't defend himself from her. He only strangled her, and that's all he ever did. But the coroner said that when the woman's body was found, she had 50 to 70 stab wounds, and she had several bruises on her body. All parts of her body, including both eyes, looked as if someone had attacked her and just brutally beaten her. But Rosendo insisted he never beat her, and that even when he put her body in the suitcase, the only thing he noticed was a mark on her back. He said that her face looked quite pale, but had no bruises on it at all. Regarding Rosendo's claim that their relations were consensual, the coroner said they found clear, unambiguous signs that this was not the case. More precisely, that everything might have started that way, but at some point it turned into violence, and the woman was tortured. He also noted that when Summer was put in that suitcase, she still had signs of life. She was not dead. The expert said that most likely she had lost consciousness from the beatings she received, but that she ultimately died from suffocation after she was put inside the suitcase. The examination also showed that because of the position her body was in, the woman was probably alive for only a short time inside before she died. And the last thing the coroner stated was that Summer was pregnant approximately in her 10th week of pregnancy. All of this was in the official report, and Rosendo was now charged with murder, which was punishable by the death penalty. After the man presented his version of events, the prosecution decides to offer him a deal. And this deal was supposed to help him reduce his final sentence. He was given this deal because when the detectives took his computer during the arrest at his house, when they checked it, they discovered that from the moment he got back to San Antonio until the moment he was arrested, the man was constantly searching for news about Summer and about the body that was found. But he was also searching for information about another woman named Joanna Rogers. Well, this immediately raised alarm among the investigators. You see, Joanna was a young girl who had disappeared without a trace about a year and a half ago, and she disappeared from the same city, Lubbock. Knowing what Rosendo had done to Summer, the detectives suspected that he had some connection to Joanna's disappearance. So they offered a deal to Rodriguez, which consisted of a very specific agreement. Rosendo Rodriguez had to plead guilty to Summer's death, and he had to tell them everything he knew about Joanna's disappearance. And if he was involved in it, they promised to give him immunity in return, basically protection. What this meant was, since Rodriguez was charged with a murder that was punishable by the death penalty, the detectives promised him that instead of execution, they would ask the judge for life imprisonment and take the death sentence off the table. Rosendo agrees to this deal, and this is what he confesses. The girl disappeared on May 4th, 2004. On this day, she came home from work quite late, almost at midnight. At that time, Joanna was living with her parents, so when she arrived, her parents were still awake. After chatting with them for a little bit, the girl went up to her room, but the next day, when her parents woke up and went to check on their daughter, she wasn't there. Her wallet, her mobile phone, and her driver's license were still in her room. Her car was also in its place. Only Joanna herself was missing. It looked as if she had just gotten up in the middle of the night and left with only the clothes she had on. For several months, the authorities, organizations, they all searched for the girl. Neighbors even offered a reward for finding her, but nothing came of it. Rosendo says that he met Joanna about a month before she disappeared. They communicated in April, and then she disappears in May. And the man said that as they talked, they gradually built up enough trust that the girl gave him her home landline phone number as well as her address. Early in the morning when she disappeared, they met near Joanna's house. Rosendo, at that time, lived in Lubbock, Texas, renting an apartment about a 20-minute drive from where Joanna lived. That morning, he says he called her on the landline and told her to come out. This was around 3 o'clock in the morning. After they met, according to him, they had consensual, intimate relations, but afterwards, Joanna starts to yell at him, demanding that he give her money. Rosendo told her that he had no intention of paying for her services. Then, she starts to tell him that since she was underage, she was going to accuse him of what had happened. And then, Rosendo did the same thing to her as he did to Summer. He strangled Joanna. He took her body to the apartment he was renting, which was about a 20-minute drive from her house. And once in the apartment, he gets a suitcase that he already had there, puts Joanna's body in it, and then takes it to a garbage container. By coincidence, the contents of this garbage container ended up at the same dump where Summer's body was found. The detectives now need to return to that same dump, and they understand that they're about to take on an almost impossible task, searching for Joanna's body. At the dump, there were layers upon layers of tons of garbage that they had to remove. I mean, there were accumulations of garbage for more than a year. This was a task that would take a lot of resources, a lot of time, and honestly, it was unknown if they would find anything there. But with the help of volunteers and police units, the search began. After more than 2 months of work, they finally find a suitcase. This suitcase was already in very poor condition, and so were the remains that were inside. The cause of death couldn't be determined. It was impossible to even understand who it was. Finally, thanks to dental records, they were able to conclude that it was indeed Joanna in the suitcase. On the day when Rosendo was supposed to appear before the judge to confirm the deal the prosecution had offered him, the accused suddenly changes his decision and says that he has changed his mind. He tells the judge that he didn't understand what the prosecution was asking him about, that he didn't understand what his lawyers told him, and that he understood nothing about what was happening. Therefore, he was now refusing the deal that was offered to him. According to that deal, Rosendo was not threatened with the death penalty. But since he refused the deal, that protection no longer applied. The bad news for the prosecution was that all the information they found, everything that Rosendo told them about Joanna, could not be used in front of the judge since he had refused the deal. When the trial began, Rosendo was charged only with capital murder for the murder of Summer. In the case of Joanna, the man could not stand trial for her murder. The trial for Summer's murder lasted 5 days, and during this trial, several women were present who claimed that Rodriguez had abused them. All of them knew him. Some of them had even been in romantic relationships with him, but they said he would change that when they refused to do what he told them to do. The man would start insulting them and showing cruelty. And he did this repeatedly. On May 14th, 2008, Rosendo Rodriguez was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The man spent 9 years in prison, waiting for the execution of this sentence. And the day after his 38th birthday, on March 27th, 2018, according to the schedule, the execution was carried out by lethal injection. While editing the video that's shown on your screen right now, I had to stop and just sit in silence. Click on it. Every second is worth it.